He had back problems too, and he was the president. Not much later in my life, when someone had asked what my childhood was like, sometimes I would tell them the story about the hospital, and it was a short way of telling them certain things about how I learned not to trust certain people, like how horrible it was to listen to long, pointless stories like the one about the gray rabbit. But there was always something weird about telling this story that made me very uneasy, like something was missing. Then one day, I was in the middle of telling it, and I was describing the little rotisseries that the kids were hanging in. And suddenly, it was like I was back in the hospital, just exactly the way it had been. And I remembered the missing part. It was the way the ward sounded at night. It was the sounds of all the children crying and screaming. It was the sounds the children make when they're dying. And then I remembered the rest of it. The heavy smell of medicine. The smell of burned skin. How afraid I was. And the way some of the beds would be empty in the morning, and the way the nurses would never talk about what had happened to these kids. They'd just go on making the beds and cleaning up around the ward. And so the thing about this story was that I'd actually only told the part about myself. And I'd forgotten the rest of it. I'd cleaned it up, just the way the nurses had. And that's what I think is the creepiest thing about stories. You try to get to the point you're making, usually about yourself or something you've learned. And you get your story, and you hold on to it. And every time you tell it, you forget it more.